What's up everyone, John from ARTV. It's time for a review of the 10th studio album by heavy metal thrash metal band Metallica, one of the original big four. This band was huge in the 80s, the 90s, even in the 2000s. They still have a big presence and a big place in a lot of metalheads' hearts. And it's something that I have never really gotten into a ton just because I'm by no means a metalhead. I want to put that out there right now, that I'm just not that much of a metal music fan, but I'm also somebody that can appreciate it. I'm very open to different genres and styles of music. I just want you to take my review with a grain of salt. Think of it like an outsider looking in with my perspective today. I wasn't sure if I was going to review this, but it really seemed like you guys wanted me to cover it. I got a lot of comments on YouTube, a lot of tweets, a lot of people on Facebook messaging me, asking me if I was going to cover it, and I decided, you know what, I owe that to them because I feel like so many people were invested in this album that's been 8 years in the making. It's been 8 years since their last record. Think about how huge that is in the world of music. To go that long, almost a decade without music. Bands like Tool and System of a Down have done very similar things except going much longer. I'm really hoping those albums come out sooner rather than later, but my fingers are no longer crossed. I have no idea when that's going to happen, if it'll ever happen. I think I'll start off by telling you guys a little bit about how I got into Metallica, my first exposure to them, and what I know about this band. No, right off the bat, I will tell you that I haven't heard all of their albums. I've heard the majority of them, and I do like what I hear, but at the same time, I'm, once again, maybe not the best person to come to whenever it comes to perspective on this band's discography. So I first got into these guys, I believe it was 2007 or 2008. I had a friend, Coleman, that was really into them. I would go to his house after school some days, and he would play me bands like Deftones, Tool, System of a Down, Korn, and obviously Metallica. Something that I connected with early on was their album, the Black Album, something that featured some of their most well-known songs, and I just felt like it was a very heavy, menacing record. It had a weird tone to it that I had never really heard before, just because I hadn't been exposed to that much metal music at the time. And then I had a friend a couple of years later that showed me their album Master of Puppets, and a couple of others, like Injustice for All, and Ride the Lightning, and then I was like, okay, I'm getting into this a little bit more, and he showed me bands like Motley Crue and some other stuff, and this was about midway through high school for me, and I remember going over there, spending the night a few times, and he actually loaned me a few of the CDs. And I found myself thinking, you know, this isn't something that I'm going to listen to all the time, but I definitely appreciate some of what's here, and I'm going to check this out, keep it in my iTunes. And I would come back to it. It would float around from time to time. I would hear songs on shuffle, but for the most part, I feel like I haven't really connected with them all that much over the years. But I decided to check out this project, Hardwired To Self Destruct, mainly because you guys really wanted me to, and I wanted to push myself to check out something that maybe, you know, maybe just maybe I would end up liking it. And for the most part, I have to say it was a pleasant experience. I actually enjoy this album for the most part in its entirety. Let's start off by talking about what plagues this project. It's a bit woeful because, yes, it's a heavy metal record. It is very long. There's some very lengthy and tedious tracks, and if you're not super into heavy metal and not all that connected with what's going on, then these songs might lose you. It's a 77-minute album, and that's just the standard edition right there. There were some extra bonus tracks and stuff. I think it was mainly live recordings and that sort of thing, so I didn't feel obliged to check that out, but 77 minutes for the standard edition of this record. The first taste of it we got was Hardwired, a song that was unusually short for them, clocking in at just over 3 minutes long, and it really encapsulates a lot of what this record is offering in terms of lyrics. Now, if you're looking for very, very in-depth analyses of our modern world, I wouldn't say that this is the place to go. But James Hetfield, the lead singer of this band, does a pretty good job of getting across his reasons for why he feels like society and just what's going on in general is doomed. And he says, we're so fucked on the single Hardwired. And then it kind of goes into this very thrashing melody, something that's going to remind some people of an album that wasn't so pleasant for a lot of fans. In fact, it's the one that gets the most hate in their entire discography, but we're just going to leave that for another day. yesterday. Maybe I'll dive into that at some point. Hardwired to Self Destruct is split into 2 discs, both of them clocking in around 40 minutes long, and I have found myself splitting it up that way just so I don't get too tired whenever I'm listening to it or too bored of the material, because I do feel like it gets a bit monotonous. Some of the riffs and of course the vocal performances, the lyrics aren't all that interesting. A lot of them seem to be preaching a very similar subject, just about mankind, where we're headed, what we've done, and just the state of the world in general. But there's some genuinely great tracks that really caught my ear and kind of pulled them a little bit closer, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm listening to this and I'm hearing some really cool guitar melodies and awesome solo, and one that jumped right off the page to me was track number 6 on the first disc, Halo on Fire. That is one that I thought was so well done. I love the vocals on it, how it feels restrained at the start, kind of this gloomy, dark, ominous, biting feel that really just starts to cut through, and then we get to see a little bit more of what they have going on in terms of drum patterns, guitars, and then it goes into that face-melting guitar solo that just really carries this song out. And I'm finding that and the closing on the second disc as well, which is called Spit Out the Bone, 2 of my favorite songs on the entire project. That one, Spit Out the Bone, is definitely more furious, in your face, sees Hetfield getting his rage on this one, and I love that. They definitely still have it all these years later. People were saying with their most recent album that maybe that was just where they should have stopped before this album came out, of course, and now I see a lot of people backtracking on that statement and saying, you know what, Metallica still have some fire under them, and I would agree with that completely. Even though I like what a lot of these songs are offering in terms of their music and even some of the vocal styles and the way that all the instrumentals line up with what he's singing, I can't say that I'm connecting all that much with some of the lyrical content on here. It does get very repetitive. Some of these songs like Am I Savage just feels very, very cheesy to me, and Here Comes Revenge just keeps cycling the same thing over and over. I feel like I'm on an exercise bike and getting nowhere, and I don't know, it kind of is a fuzz and a layer there that I feel like I could remove. They could have done things a little bit better in some departments, but then I find myself gravitating back towards that song perhaps for a different reason. Maybe there's a really cool guitar part in there that I enjoyed, or maybe they go into a really fast-paced drum break, or some of the bass sounded really cool on it. So there are draws to this record, but there's also flaws. Draws and flaws. I unintentionally rhymed. I definitely think the first disc is my favorite out of the 2. There's some really great tracks on there. Moth into Flame is fantastic. I love that one. There's an energy about it, a certain presence that's very much Metallica. That and Atlas Rise, another one that clocks in at about 6.5 minutes, and it's one that I'm really finding myself connecting with just because it's got pretty much everything that I could want from this band all in one song. Now, I'm honestly not really that keen on the lead-off single, Hardwired. It's one that I don't find to be all that entertaining as a whole, but once we get past that, pretty much all the other songs on the first disc are something that I could throw on and have a good time with, feel very entertained by, and appreciate the musicianship of. There's a song on disc 2 that actually really took me by surprise. I didn't really care for it the first few times I heard it, and especially since I didn't care for the title whenever I saw the track listing, I saw Man Unkind. Like, you know, mankind, except they changed it to unkind. I was like, oh my goodness. Can we get much cheesier than that? But then I actually heard the song and started paying attention to its nuances and details a little bit more and deciphering what its lyrical message was all about. And I was like, this is actually a pretty well thought out and intelligent song. One of the best on the second disc, if not the entire record that we have here on our hands. It's one that explores a little bit more, and I like seeing it go into a different foray of instrumentation, territory, still bringing in some menacing guitars that really prove to be a big threat for the song, but at the same time, it doesn't lose its charge as it goes on. This one goes for about 7 minutes, and I really felt thoroughly entertained all throughout. Hardwired to Self Destruct is an enjoyable album overall. If you're into Metallica at all, you're questioning whether you should check out this release, maybe you've heard a couple of songs, I say go for it, because this album isn't necessarily totally savage or just the best thing out there in the market, even in terms of metal these days, but it's something that caught my attention even as a non-metalhead, and I could really appreciate what they have to offer here, and confidently say years later that I still like what I'm hearing from them. They're definitely putting out quality stuff and not just phoning it in, and that's something that is very surprising because a lot of bands will just do that these days, but I'm glad that they actually made their return worthwhile. It was a very successful album for them, debuting at #1 in so many countries, selling over 280,000 copies first week in the United States, and in this day and age, that is nothing to scoff at. For me personally, I'm gonna go with a light 3.5 for Hardwired to Self Destruct by heavy metal band Metallica. I hope you guys enjoyed a review from a metal noob today. Be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, because friends don't let friends go unsubscribed. You can see another rare metal review right here, or another review that I did on this channel by clicking right below me. Find me on social media over here, and it'll be linked in the description. I'll see you guys very soon right here on ARTV.